behavioral actions are translated into mental illness, which creates a stigma. But if you look at it as a structural issue, just like as you look at high blood pressure, or you look at asthma, or you look at intestinal problems, and then you look at the brain and the way it functions, it's all a structural issue. So they're looking at it more as a disease than an illness. And that may not seem like a lot, but what it does with us, if we meet somebody who appears or behaves slightly different than us, then we think of them as abnormal and we're concerned about them and we ostracize them. If we realize that someone's dealing with a neurological problem, such as schizophrenia, which is really the way we communicate neurologically. You and I communicate more in a healthy fashion. We can think effectively. With schizophrenics, they're listening to a whole schema of other sense realm information that they have to take into account. So does ADHD. So they can't really focus on the things that you and I focus. In our brain, there's a mechanism that forgets certain things. Like you're not thinking about the arm that you're leaning against, you're just leaning against it. Or I don't have to think about the floor. When I go outside, I'll let the noise of the cars kind of fade into the background. With those kind of neurotransmitted issues in bioscience, they're as equally concentrating on all of those things, and they're overwhelmed. And so science is trying to look at it differently. So in psychotherapy and talk therapy, what I'm doing is trying to combine the neuroscience with the talk therapy or the cognitive therapy. And it's a new technique called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it bilaterally helps the brain to function in a more effective way while we're looking at what are the obstacles. For instance, if a tornado ripped through this building, on the other half of the building, and I told you that tomorrow was going to rip through the building again, would you come back to this building? No, because you were so traumatized. But if you go out in an automobile accident, the next day you have to get back in a car, go right back onto the battlefield. Your prefrontal cortex doesn't quite know how to process that information. Am I going to be safe today? Am I going to get into another accident? So it's what's called PTSD, or it's a post-trauma experience about an event in the past that your brain is trying desperately to get a handle on, to redefine the familiarity of trust and feel safe when they're driving. So that I can talk to you all day long, but that trapped, unprocessed memory is not going to be effective through talking. So the bilateral stimulation helps the prefrontal cortex to put that event in its proper perspective so that you can begin to say, yes, there is a chance I'll end up in an accident, but there's more likelihood that I will be safe driving. And you go back to a pattern of being more aware, hopefully more defensive.